I am here for episode 15 with Claudia Romo Edelman. Thank you so much for joining me on what will be the finale of the 2023 season of Insider Interviews. You are so purpose-led and purpose-oriented, and as you know, that is a big theme for all of season 2 of Insider Interviews. So we're going to get into that a little bit. But I want to start out just by saying, was the Global Citizens Concert created in your honor? You are a global citizen. Tell us where you've been, where you were raised, where you lived. It's fascinating to me.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And I should start by thanking you and giving you big kudos for the incredible preparation that you have had for this. I am a podcaster myself, and I know what it takes. And you are the example of, like being thorough about what you want your guests to have. And I learned a lot in this process. So I'm a Mexican Swiss American now, former diplomat, a marketer that have lived the first part of my life in Mexico, and then I moved to Europe, first as a journalist and a diplomat, and then I moved into being a humanitarian for the last 25 years before moving to America. So I did the United Nations, the UNICEF, the UN Refugee Agency, the Global Fund to Fight AIDS, Tuberculosis, and Malaria, pretty much always doing the same thing. So same wine, different bottle, being a marketer for social causes, trying to win the hearts and minds of people and do that in a global scale. So I'm a global mobilization expert, if you want, that launches campaign that can get a lot of people to agree on ambitious goals. And then I do that pretty much as a brand builder. So I build brands that can create frameworks that can mobilize millions.
I'm not worthy, but thank you then for joining us, because you're going to share a lot of scoop, I think, and really help educate our audience, I believe. Hey, it's E.B. Moss, and this is episode 15 of Insider Interviews, where you get the insider's scoop on the business of media, marketing, and advertising. Now, you know that for season 2, I've asked all of my guests their definition of brand purpose. I can think of no better guest to wrap up 2023 than Claudia Romo Edelman. She basically embodies brand purpose. She's a marketing professor. She worked at the UN and UNICEF. She helped launch some major pro-social campaigns that she'll talk about in this episode. And I'm thrilled to have her here as the founder of We Are All Human, a nonprofit that's working really hard to level the playing field across diversity, equity, inclusion, and to elevate the perception of the Hispanic community overall. So here's Claudia. Claudia Romo Edelman, hello. Where are you?
Hi, I'm in New York City in my home office.
In your home office that looks like a library.
I know, it is a library.
Really? Wow. Tell me about that.
We moved a couple of years ago to the old police building in what used to be the most criminal area of New York. And as a fact, we live in the gymnasium of that old police building. So I am part of a basketball court, if you want. And there's a library where I have my office.
Really? I love that. Everything from Wheaties to a book on Selena. That's perfect. That sort of sums it up.
Well, that is actually the collection of content that we have produced through the We're All Human Foundation. It's a series of Hispanic Star products or books or content, or I think that there's you can see the Hispanic Star here,
Yes.
the brand.
One of the things that you did along the path was you launched a couple of pretty impressive campaigns. One of my favorites on Product Red. You also worked a lot on the Sustainable Development Goals and the SDG Lions from Cannes. Can you tell us a little bit about some of your favorite campaigns and what your role was with those?
So I've been very privileged to be able to work for the most amazing organizations and being at the room where it happens, like pretty much where there's a fire or a crisis or something big that has happened. And that's why I really like the brand purpose idea. And I just published an op-ed on that effect as a fact in Ad Age during Hispanic Heritage Month this month, because I think that purpose is the way to go. As a fact, purpose was the way to go 20 years ago. If you're not a company or if you're not in the business of like uh, purpose-led, people-led, planet-led, then probably you're out of business right now. But I think that diversity, equity, and inclusion will go through the same. So I think that part of the proudest campaigns that I've been part of include the launch of the Sustainable
Hmm.
Development Goals, the SDGs or global goals that involved putting a master plan of what is the future of the people on the planet, getting consensus of 193 countries, and then making sure that we were able to launch them in a way that people would want to be part of it and express them and have a pin on it and put them on the back of the cereal. And if you're a company, you want to be associated with it because it means it gives you a
Yes.
halo of you're a good company and you belong to something good. I was able to extend that to the Cannes Advertisement Festival and create a series of awards called the Sustainable Development Goals Lions, bringing that impact to the creative industry so that creatives can batch
Right.
their briefs and make sure that what they were doing was also purpose led. Product Red is another one that I really love. Working for the Global Fund to fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria, we needed a consumer arm, something that people can do what they like to do, which is
Yes,
to shop
exactly.
and to
I do.
buy, but do that by choosing between one phone or another. You choose the one that is cool and it gives you an emotion, but at the same time helps
Right.
people down the road, really far down the line. So Product Red has in 12 years been able to raise more than $650 million
Oh,
or like. So that those are
yeah.
another one.
We know from statistics that given a choice, consumers will opt for the purpose driven brand and feel better about that purchase. I know that that's always been something that brands can hang their hat on. So I do want to kick off with your definition of brand purpose. But I think I have an expert in the house. So, how would you define it? And what's perhaps one example of what you're doing now where you're encouraging brands to align with purpose?
Brand purpose, social marketing, grassroots marketing, whatever you want to call it, it is putting your marketing dollars by investing in the community first. So it is pretty much looking at purpose-led
Okay.
campaigns. How are you going to not only come to me to sell me your soap, but how are you going to talk to me about how you're improving my community's future by setting up a school, if you want, or by investing in my community by making sure that I am much better off. And then you can say that it is sponsored by the soap that I'm going to be connected with and that I want to make a choice for. Particularly prominent, I would say, for the Latino community, because given that we're so many, so big, so young, it's like a really coming out community, and everybody's looking at the data and saying like, "Wow, I love it. 20% of the population is Latino. I want to go Latino. I want to sell to Latinos. I want to hire Latino. I want to vote Latino." But you're not investing in us. You're going after our
Mm-hmm.
wallet or you're going after my result, and that's never gonna work. Because what really works when you have a brand purpose led or a social marketing led campaign is you have to win my
Yeah.
trust. And you're not going to do that if you just want to use me for your
Yeah.
transaction. So you need to invest in a relationship building that is very much related to what, like understanding who I am, what I need. And in the case of Latino, that's pretty easy. And I always like hesitate on saying like, why do people have so much issues on not taking action? Because really Latinos, even if we're very
Mm-hmm.
diverse and we're not that homogeneous community, we have a lot of things that we have one in common. And one of them is
Yeah.
progress. So if you want to have a brand purpose-led campaign to win the hearts and minds of Latinos, invest in our future. Help us to get the next
Put your
job.
money where
Help
your
us to
mouth
be
is.
better educated.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Help us to get better educated. And then you can say, this was something brought to you by, I don't know, Gillette or
Right.
Always or Dove
Okay,
or,
so
yeah.
come from authenticity. And, I did a quick interview with Bon and Bao of Group Black. And one of the things that he said is don't just spend money targeting me, but, spend money in my community. So I think you're
Mhm.
saying the same thing so that consumers will then want to vote with their pocketbook and select your product because they know that you're giving back to my community instead of just identifying a target audience.
And I do think that it is different to all communities. For us, and I think that in general, what really makes sense is to investigate what are the pain points, what are the growing areas, and whether it's community led or not, and what are the
Yeah.
drivers, right? Like what drives a community. And when you put a sense of when passion meet purpose in a way, then you have a better chance of understanding. For Latinos, it is community driven, but it's also a lot of the pain point of the Latino community comes from invisibility. So we're not seen, we're not heard, we're not valued, we're not in front of camera, we're not in front behind the camera. So what you can do is show me that you
Uh-huh.
see me. Put me in front of an ad. Make sure that I see you respecting me and not stereotyping me. Don't place me as a narco or as like a gritona or like a loud
Right.
person. And that's giving me a sense that you're just using me. You're not understanding me. You don't really know who I am. So understanding the pain points of the communities you want to target, and then making sure that you're putting your money on the table and understanding the driver. So if the Latino community, as I said, the driver of Latinos is
Mm-hmm.
progress, the pain point is invisibility and those systemic barriers that are attached to the community, better health, better education, better jobs, better
Yes.
gender equality. There's a roadmap.
All right. And so I think that you are kind of paving that roadmap. You're creating that roadmap through We Are All Human. Is that correct?
We're All Human is a non for profit devoted to advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion. It is not called We Are All Latinos. It's called We Are All Human because I do think that the wave that is coming and will continue being will be the diversity, equity, and inclusion wave. I don't think that people will choose in the future without saying, can I feel respected here? Can I come to a place where I don't see anybody like myself? So I do think that that's the bigger wave. But look, I moved to America 9 years ago. That was the first ever time that I heard I was a Hispanic. I was like, what is
Really?
that? Like, I've been a happy Mexican my
So
entire life. I
in
lived
Europe,
in
you weren't
Europe
called
20.
a Hispanic. You were just
No, that doesn't exist anywhere in the world.
amazing.
Like you're Mexican or you're like Venezuelan or you're
Yeah,
Japanese or whatever. It's not like you Hispanics. That only
I
happens in
see.
America where we're like a label. And so all of a sudden I'm like, who gave us that label and what does it mean? Is it a good
Uh-huh.
thing or a
Uh-huh.
bad thing? And like it didn't really hit me until I got
Mm-hmm.
married to an American 6 years ago, and I was like, okay, so this now it will be my country. This will be my future. No more diplomatic life traveling from one country to the other. So I want to learn more about this
Uh-huh.
community I'm going to belong to. And I started looking at the data, and the data was powerful. 62 million people, 20% of the population, going to 30% of the population by
Mm-hmm.
2050. $3.2 trillion dollars is the size of the economy. And just to put that into context, it's 14% of the GDP. So if we would be a standalone economy, we would be the fifth largest economy in the world, larger than the UK, larger than Canada, than Italy, than Brazil. It's massive. Latinos are massive. And the purchasing power, $3.4 trillion dollars and growing. That means the size of our wallet is increasing. We used to buy oil mazola. Now we're like buying lipstick and buying homes. And so this is going to be the next billionaire list in the world. And people are not paying
No.
attention to us. And I saw that and I was like, wait, if the data is so powerful and the reality is so weak, we have a reverse marketing
Uh-huh.
problem here. And I think that what we could do is reverse it, is fix it, change it, understand why do we have such a distorted mirror? Why are Latinos seen so small when we're
Yeah.
so big? Why Latinos value and feel so weak when we're so powerful? Where is the issue? And the World Human Foundation then turned into an initiative called the Hispanic Star, trying to fix and solve and understand this reverse marketing problem. And what we learned is that one of the biggest issues, we have systemic barriers, better education, better health, better gender equality, better jobs, for sure. But one of the main things is that Latinos were fragmented, not unified. The Mexicans don't talk to the Venezuelans, the
Right.
Colombians, the rich, the poor, the Republican, the Democrat, and we're like elbowing each other. There was a scarcity mentality. And because of that, we were not educated about our own contributions to the country. 77% of Latinos had no idea of the things that I just mentioned, how many we are, how young we are, how powerful we are. So when you're ignorant or blind and fragmented, then you're weak. So we started working towards unifying the Latino community and empowering them through content, through anything that we could, so that people would get the data and the history, the power of Latinos through anything that we can. So
I
all
see.
of those books, all of the radio, all of the things that like we will do anything so that we can get to people, so that we can educate them and make them aware of our own power. And what I am so glad to report is that for the last 5 years, I've never seen social change happen so fast. So in the 5 years from the Hispanic Sentiment Study 2018 to
Hmm.
2023, we've seen the Latino unity rise from 14%, 14, almost 85% of Latinos felt that we were not connected, not unified, and so on 5 years ago. And that has gone to almost
Really
50%. It's almost like half of Latinos now feel
connected. Yeah.
united. Half of Latinos now feel that it's a pro to be a Latino because they feel more proud. So
Mm.
those two areas of unity and pride of Latinos are on the rise. There's more Spanish, there's more culture. People want to take off their mask and don't call me George, call me Jorge.
Great.
Don't call me Mark Pritchard. My name is
Yeah.
Nikki Gonzalez. So there you will see a country that has more of that. And I think that that's where the Hispanic Star, the initiative of the World Human Foundation, has tried to play a role in giving Latinos a brand, if you want, a symbol, since we're so many and this is an invented label, so it's not really a coherent community. How do you put it together being so fragmented? So
I want to
ideally,
slow you
yeah.
down for just a second because you are enthusiastic with a lot of great information. Because this podcast is available as audio or video, I want you to describe once again what you were holding up as a symbol that was created by WPP and how you're using that star. Tell us again about its origins.
The brief that we gave was Latinos are powerful but don't know about it and are fragmented, and we need to unify them. And we need everybody in the country to know that what is good for Hispanics is good for America because we're so many. WPP through Gray came back with the creation of a symbol, a brand, the way you see the rings of the Olympics and you think that's the best
Yeah.
of sports, or ideally when you see the ring of the Sustainable Development Goals that you think that's the best of humanity. We needed a symbol to unify all Latinos, whether you're Mexican, Colombian, Venezuelan. So they took the star from the American flag and the virgulillo or ñ that you put in on top of the the española, like the ñ for Espanol or Portuguese, and put it together as a symbol called the Hispanic
Love
Star
it.
or the Latinx Star or whatever it is. And that symbol aims to be a platform to showcase the amazing contributions of Latinos to the country so that we can highlight how much we're contributing to the economy, to the job creation, to the culture, to highlight the stories of success that we have, to make sure that people understand that America is made of stars and we are
I
one of
love
them.
that, Claudia.
And so that brand is growing. We launched it. We were launching it on March 2020 when
Uh
COVID
huh.
happened. So we had to repurpose the brand and make it a brand purpose. And so what we did was call it the Hispanic Star in Action and galvanize more than 25 companies to donate, to give back to the community, to
Mm.
support those Latinos affected by COVID. Now that COVID is over, we're taking it back and we're using that right now for content creation. So we do a lot of books, a lot of podcasts, a lot of radio, a lot of campaigns, a lot of infographics, a lot of education, and equipping companies. We are going to, through the Hispanic Star, launch a perception changing campaign so that we can properly launch the brand. So when I go to places like the Cannes Advertisement
Hmm.
Festival, we're saying like, look, there's opportunities out there like Hispanic Heritage Month that is like you're leaving money on the table, amigos, because you can make Hispanic Heritage Month as big as Pride meets Halloween, because Latinos want to
Yes.
see themselves. We want visibility. We want to see ourselves reflected, and it's great for everybody because Latinos are going to be highlighted and their stories are going to be told, and you're going to be able to sell the Hispanic Star or
Yep.
put the Hispanic Star on the window, on the T-shirt, on the tennis shoes that you want to sell. So
Hmm.
that's pretty much where we see the Hispanic Star going. We want the Hispanic Star to be like the rainbow for the LGBTQ for Latinos.
Perfect.
I think that for media, for marketers, there's nothing like that in the
Right.
market right now that can allow you to show leg about how much you
Yeah.
care so that people can identify
So
you.
I guess we call that a brand recognition code in your
Right.
professor of marketing lingo. Uh, so, what inspired you to really go down this path? It was coming to America and being labeled as Hispanic or Latina or whatever it is. Was there something in your personal life? I know you had like a strong mom and a strong work ethic, but what really sparked this part of your career path?
I think that for every Latino or Latina, we're the result of our family. And a lot of the people that are in this country are coming from strong
Hmm.
mothers or fathers. And in my case, my mother was a professional basketball player. As a fact, she was in the national team playing basketball in Mexico. And she had three kids and became an economist after not being able to
Hmm.
play anymore professionally. And at some point in her life, when she was like in her mid 40s, she decided that she didn't want to do that. She wanted to be an actress. So everybody was like, "What? You're crazy. How can you do that? You're a single mom with a daughter, and how are you gonna do that? Because my two siblings died. How are you gonna do that?" And I saw her. And it was a struggle. It was like a hardcore transition. And I saw her. It's not that she was fearless because she was panicking. She was really scared, but she was not, she was fear
Hmm.
free. She was not going to let fear decide for herself. She wanted to take the decisions on her life and manage her fear. And I think that something similar happened to me a couple of years ago when I discovered that I was a Latina and I got married. There was a moment in which I thought like, wow, my daughter is a
Oh,
Latina. And because she is a Latina, she's going to make 50% of the salary, which is what Latinas do. And so I was like, wow, because of my choice, she's going to make 50% of her salary and her future will be cropped because Latinos are seen as takers and not makers. And I knew that the reality was different and we're makers.
yeah.
We're making this country. We're making this country better. We're contributing and so on. So I decided that I was going to try to do something for my community, having the tips and tricks that I learned over the last years. I was going to hit myself in the wall if I didn't do something.
I
So
see.
I took my mother's example and left what I knew, my global setting, my big organizations, and set up a foundation without having ever done that, petrified trying to manage my fear, and that 50% of the salary for my daughter was the trigger for
Uh,
me to give it all, to try it all.
Now, do you think that your kids are going to follow in your footsteps and head into media and marketing? No.
No,
Basketball?
I don't think so. Look, my husband has a PR company. I am a marketer from the first moment in the day. Like I think in that way. No, I actually know that my kids, like have a very different path, and I don't think that it is related to like exhaustion or that like they're like overdone with it. But my daughter wants to be an economist.
Oh,
My son is studying applied maths and computer science, and he wants to do machine learned biases. So I really don't think that they're gonna
oh
go
my
this
gosh.
path. But I do recommend to everybody to really understand the power of marketing, whether you're a small business or whether you're an individual, particularly for people of
Yes.
color. It is really important that we devote at least, like a good proportion of our time, our effort, our investment to raise our bar. We have a double sword. We have to not only like raise like the normal
Uh-huh.
awareness of our small business or our companies, but we have to do it on top of the stereotypes
It
and the
it's
biases
like
that
what they
exist
said about
against us.
Ginger Rogers doing everything Fred Astaire did, but backwards and in heels. So much more
Exactly.
concerted effort when you are of Hispanic origin. Talk about imposter complex. You have a master's in political communication from the London School of Economics. So there's a little bit of the apple tree and the economics there with your kids and that poli sci.
That's amazing. That's true.
You speak six languages. I got a bachelor's degree from Rutgers. I know about 10 words of Hebrew and about 50 words of Spanish, but we are both podcasters. So I want to talk about your podcast, which is really terrific. I've listened to quite a few episodes, A la Latina. And you have had some really meaningful conversations. You've had people like the EVP of Salesforce on it, the Chief Communications Officer of Coca-Cola, and our mutual friend who introduced us and one of my recent guests, Marissa Solis, the SVP of the NFL. So let's talk a little bit about the value of podcasting in communicating exactly what you're trying to get across. Is there a through line of what these successful Latina women have in common, or is there any advice that they agree on about elevating Hispanic women in the workforce?
We were so surprised in the podcast A la Latina, the playbook to succeed being your authentic self. There's common threads. We totally got common ground and the same type of experiences that led us to create, with a lot of confidence, a playbook, at least of this first season that we're going to be releasing quite shortly. It is going to be our last episode on season one, very similar to
Yes.
yours. And yes, indeed, there is a playbook. And pretty much that's one of the reasons we created this podcast. I felt that the World Human Foundation has a path of success on the basics of the unification and the pride of the Latino community, and unity and pride equals progress. Now we needed to double down and see how do we actually, like, how do we get laser focused on the Latina community, on those Latinas that want to progress but are stumbling even harder
Yeah.
than men in raising their careers. And when you make it, you want to make it intact, not bruised, not scarred, and not pretending to not be Latinas, which is another one of the issues that we
Oh,
have identified, that when you make it, it's already by denying yourself, by pretending you're not Latina. You're like, I don't want to see and I don't want to know
yeah.
anything. So we started this podcast with the objective of making sure that that 9% of the population that are Latinas, that are only 2% in corporate suites, in corporate jobs, or in politics and so on, can increase and be more at par, and that we do it in half the time. Cynthia Kleinbaum Milner and I,
Yes.
my co host, identify a number of very successful Latinas in the C suite of corporate America. And very surprisingly, all of them have very similar experiences and paths. And we started looking at some of the tricks that work for them to get to those
Oh,
advices. One of my favorite one, and I think that is the common ground for everybody, is be your authentic
uh-huh.
self. And you would think that is really not corporate advice, but it is such a piece of promotion advice. We know that 77% of Latinos cannot be themselves at the workplace. So if you're Jorge, you come to work and you pretend to be
Right.
George, and you leave yourself at home and you come to work with someone you don't even know. And that hurts you dramatically because you have to deny yourself, diminish yourself, and it's almost like bleeding every day a little bit. But guess what? It hurts also your promotions, because the more you pretend to be someone else, the less authentic you come across, the less trust you can build. You're not being your full self. And that is also a shame for companies, because when Latinos feel that they cannot be themselves, probably they don't
Yeah.
feel welcomed, and you're going to go there's a revolving door potential there. So be your authentic self, including, for example, accentism. We have a methodology in the podcast called the flip the script, where we try to understand how to shift a situation from biases or stereotypes to
Hmm.
facts and values. So accentism is a perfect example of being your authentic self, understanding what are the facts and what are the biases. And accentism the unconscious bias in corporations is related to performance. So if you have a heavy accent
Uh-huh.
like me, the biases is like, you probably are not so good in what you do, or you're not that as
Wow.
intelligent. And that's a bias, right? Like, and it really hurts the self-confidence of Latinos in performing. You don't raise your hand as much, so hindering your visibility and therefore your career growth. Well, in reality, if you look at it, accentism means you have speak two languages.
Exactly.
That's
Or in your
bilingualism.
case,
The
six.
reality is bilingualism, not accentism. So the reality of bilingualism is that you speak two languages, therefore you can talk to two different groups, therefore you probably are really good at international deals, probably you're good at negotiation, and
I
even
love that.
more. We can talk about like the science of bilingualism and talk that the brain that is bilingual is more adaptable, more flexible. You're better in navigation of change and so on. So if you're a manager and you were like, oh my God, all of a sudden I don't see
Yeah.
Maria as stupid, like, or as incompetent. I see her as a potential bilingual, multicultural, and
Right.
that gives Maria and the company a really hard start. So that's number one. And I think that the last one that I want to mention of the 10 items of the playbook in the podcast A la Latina is that careers are long. I so much wish I would know that as like 20
Yeah.
years ago, because you would take more risks when you know that it doesn't matter, like at the end of the day, you're gonna like destinations are long
Hmm.
term, and so you can take more risk, calculated risk, think about them more. There's a possibility to have lateral moves, even backwards moves, so that you can understand the operations of the company better. If you would know that, and that is really most of our guests that spoke about that, then you could start thinking of your career in a more strategic, long-term way, taking more calculated risk, and understand that the destination is not going to come if you make one single mistake. Everything
Right.
is
And we
linear.
learn from every change that we make. So I heard a through line of authenticity, both for companies who, as we said at the beginning of this episode, invest in the community, not just invest in advertising targeting the community. And there's a through line of successful women being their authentic selves. And it's not just an Oprah word. It really is true. But I want to talk now in our remaining minutes a little bit about how brands can really leverage all of these insights. And I'll start off with talking about our favorite topic, podcasts. There was a stat that came out recently from Edison Research, and I'm going to read this now, that the Latino podcast listener report says that 38% of Latinos 18 plus versus 42% of the total 18 plus pop are monthly listeners to podcasts, but that's up 4% from a year ago. That is actually a rate of listening that's 4 times faster than the general US population among Latino listeners, which we love. Now, their head of research also said that it's not just about investing in diversity, it's a smart business decision. So I know that you call yourself a factivist as opposed to an activist. I threw a lot of facts out there, but how do we convince advertisers to up their investment in this audience?
The factivism part. Latinos are 20% of the Gen Z, the generation that everybody wants to talk to. We're 20% of that. We're 28% of the alpha generation. Every time the younger you look, the more Latinos you will find. That number of 4x growth in podcast, you can pretty much know that 4x is in
Oh,
everything. Latinas create 6 times faster than any other group in America. Small businesses, we consume 2 times more than anyone else social media, 6 hours of social media a day. We don't sleep much. So we have an incredible potential community here that feels equally Hispanic and American, converting at 200% of a person that will make choices based on how much you understand me, how much you reflect me, how much do you care for me, how much do you care for my community, not how much you want to get into my wallet. There's absolutely ways in which brands can show respectfully and genuinely how they care about the Latino community and how much they can build those authentic relationships. I absolutely think that the time is now, but So I wouldn't hesitate a second in making sure that you are proclaiming yourself, like investing in the community and taking the big bet. A lot of the times, what I have seen is that brands understand the growth of the Latino community, but don't know how to do it or want to do it in a moderate way as a pilot. Like you get what you
Yeah.
invest. So I think that given the facts, you have to take the big bet. You have to do like the NFL has done. You have to do what other successful companies have done, which is like bet in the Latino community the way that you would invest in any growth
Yeah.
market. Take the big bet. Be conscious about what matters to the Latino community, which is again our community being visible, being respectful, like don't stereotype Latinos, create a narrative that is meaningful, respectful, and relevant, and go to organizations to partner with that can help you with. The World Human Foundation has pretty much made it its business to help companies and brands on how to develop Latino strategies and really create genuine and strong relationships with Latinos as consumers, as employees, and as the community. So I think that all the conditions
Okay.
there for brands to succeed winning the Latino market. You have to do it in a way that is authentic, respectful, understanding our priorities, and investing on us. And this is the time. I mean, like having Bad Bunny and Mick Jagger speaking Spanish on a television
Right.
show, having 4x growth in podcasts, that's data that is undeniable. So waste no time.
So speaking of speaking Spanish, is that just this morning, I listened to, CNN headlines every morning, and the pre-roll ad was completely in Spanish. And it was for Burlington Coat Factory, complete Spanish. And, I'm fortunate enough that I did minor in Spanish, but I was really curious about that since, I don't know enough Spanish to be the recipient of that targeted ad. So, what are the top three things that brands should do? Should they communicate in Spanish, I don't know if this is a correct word, Spanglish and a combination, and use some idioms? How do we do better to authentically reach the Hispanic listener, viewer, whatever?
The Hispanic sentiment study was very clear, the comparative study between 2018 and 2023. Latinos feel every time more connected to their values, and that includes language. So, language, culture, food, values, family, they want to see that reflected. If you look, what is the most popular beer in the country? The number one beer in the country is Modelo. And that is not because Latinos drink more than anyone else, and we're like it's because it just went through general market because everybody wants to consume or take something Latino. There's Latino values that are there, and that is language as well. So the biggest jump that we saw in that value was the usage of language. So you would be very safe in making sure that you can target the Latino community through language and using that in spaces where they are, not necessarily where the language is the dominant. So if you're like listening to CNN and there's an ad in Spanish, the likelihood is because there's Latinos listening to CNN. And that's really important because with all the restrictions of privacy that many companies have, that they cannot target Latinos, Google cannot target Latinos, and so on, language is a really safe bet to go there. I think that if you're going to use Spanglish, use that in a way when you feel confident that you know what you're doing, because otherwise it's like cultural appropriation and it feels funny. I am a Spanglish pro. I speak to my kids, like one way and the other. It depends on what mood, what
If
day
they're
I
good
see
or
them in
bad?
their consumption. No, no, it is also a matter of the topic and the moment. And sometimes when you're tired, you just go to your language. When I am loving, like when I am more emotional, I'm talking to my kids in Spanish as opposed to when I'm telling them about homework or things like that. But you can see there's many studies that indicate that Spanish is not geographic, it's cultural. So when you're like listening or when you're watching a soccer game, you scream in Spanish, and so you'll be better in advertising in that language. But when you're listening to the news, like you might go to CNN, so you can go into language to say like, "Oh, you're talking to me. You're paying attention to me." Language is not necessarily the thing that people click when they go and buy a
Yes.
trip, but when you have the version in Spanish, it means respect. You know that I exist, and I appreciate that.
Excellent. That was exactly what we needed to hear, I think, Claudia.
Thank you so much. I think that, look, the Latino community is an incredible contributor to the country. Hispanic progress is Americans' progress, and Latinos are stars, stars of football, stars of architecture, stars of marketing. And it's not that we were not shining all along, right? Like since the 16th century, it's not that we're like newcomers and the newcomers are shining. We've been there. We just have an enormous cloud covering us. And so marketers that help us uncover those clouds, like let us shine, are going to win our respect, are going to win our trust. And I hope that the work that the World Human is doing is going to be a helpful hand for brands and for marketers to be able to get not only the insights, but also the connections at the grassroots level so that you can get involved in it. It's like happening every December. That's a great opportunity to come, and we want to build around that. Mark Anthony, the singer, and I have our galas around the same time, and we will continue doing that the first week of December every year because we want to build a Hispanic Star Week, if you want. We want to build around that, and every year, all eyes on New York, on Latinos, looking beautiful, shining along. And I think that if you're a brand, you can count on those
Yes.
moments that are not necessarily Cinco de Mayo or like that, but
Right.
are like on the elegant and elevated, so that you can start planning and building around and partner with us.
Excellent. We are all human, Claudia Romo Edelman, and never has that line been more important. And so I thank you for what you're doing to raise awareness of all ethnicities and for shining a light on the star of the Hispanic community as well. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much, and also for the opportunity to showcase the A La Latina podcast, the Playbook to Succeed. Thank you so thank you.
Well, I hope you got some good insider scoop from this episode of Insider Interviews with me, E.B. Moss. If you enjoyed this content, please feel free to buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/mossappeal. And I hope you'll follow Insider Interviews on social media and let me know if you have a question or a suggestion for a next stellar guest in media, marketing, and advertising. Speaking of stellar, my theme music was composed and performed by the incomparable Grammy-winning John Clayton. If I can help you with your company's podcast, please find me at mossappeal.com. Thanks again for listening.